Today's daf we're going to be learning is Shekalim daf Tet Zayin. Reminding everyone we are nearing the Siyum. Hopefully today the invite will go out. We have a special woman who's finishing Shas with us, who will join us at the Siyum and finish her Siyum Shas. She started last cycle in Yoma. So we're very excited about that. So, okay, that will be on Sunday at 8:30, the regular time that we usually have our Siyums. And which will be, it's just so you get clear. The real last day is Monday, just like last time. So we're going to learn Sunday's daf, Sunday, the usual time, and then Sunday evening, Israel time, which whatever time it is by wherever you are, we'll be doing the last daf, and we'll learn the last daf at the Siyum. And then there'll be no regular class on Monday, as usual. For now, we keep having the same cycle where it's the same day. Once it gets to the middle of the week, it will be a little bit different. But since we can still do it on Sundays, since we have people all around the world, Sunday is usually a good day, so we're going to do it on Sunday. Today's daf is sponsored by Shari Judah in honor of those who work to help me obtain my freedom and receive a get after over a decade. Okay, so now we're going to get started. We're starting from Tet Zayin Amud Aleph on the third line. We talked about the Aram. If you remember the ark, there were three opinions about what happened to it, really two that split off. One splits into two different opinions. Was it hidden? And now we're going to learn who hid it and why. Was it hidden somewhere in the temple, either under the Kodesh Kodashim, or we saw maybe under the room where the wood was kept? And that's based on those stories that there was something out of whack on the floor in that room, and then people died, and there were all these traditions about that, different kind of situations, what exactly happened. Then we saw the opinion that possibly it was actually taken by the Babylonians. So today we're going to stick with the opinion that it was hidden, and we're going to see who hid it, and what else was hidden with it. Mishenignaz ha'aron nignaz imo tzinsenet haman, utzluchit shemen hamishcha, umaklo shel ha'aron uprachav ushkedav, v'argaz shishivu plishtim asham lelohei Israel. We're now going to learn that there were four things that were hidden with the Aram. Okay, when they hid the Aram, they hid these four things that all of them, and we're going to see the psukim, all of them were learned out from verses that they were always kept next to the Aram. And because they were kept next to the Aram, when they decided to bury the Aram, they decided to bury them with. Three of these are very similar. And one of these things, as we say, right, is not like the other. So let's read. The Tzinsenet Haman is a piece of the man left over from the desert. So when the Jews were in the desert, they ate the man every day. That was something miraculous. We're going to see the common thread between all these is miracles. But again, as I said, one is a little different than the others. So the man, there was a piece left over that they always kept with them. If you look in the Taklin Chadatin, if you have the commentaries on the side, he's going to give us verses for all of these things. So it's in Tzinsenet Haman, he says in the Tosefta, Nignazi Mot Tzinsenet, B'Tosefta sham, in the Tosefta there, it says, V'yalef midichtiv ba'aron asher va'ed lacha shama. It says, the Aron is the place where I will communicate with you there. Uktiv b'Tzinsenet Haman, v'tein shama melo ha'omer, and give there. Shama appears there and Shama appears there. So because Shama appears in both places, they say it must be, and Shama means there. So it must be that they put the Tzinsenet Haman there next to the Aram. So that's the first drasha. Sluchit shemen hamishcha. There was a jug with the shemen hamishcha. That was the oil that they used to anoint the kings and to anoint the kelim, the vessels in the temple, and to anoint the kohanim gedolim. So we're going to learn a lot more about the anointing later in today's daf. So it says again, back to the Taklin Chadatin, because the Gemara doesn't give us the psukim. Sluchit dichtiv be lidorotechem. It says for generations, for future generations. The Chen Gabetz in Senate, it says lidorotechem. So it says by the man lidorotechem, and it says by the oil lidorotechem. So therefore, they do, again, all these are gzera shava, the same word appears by both. So if already we said the man is next to the Aram, it must be also the oil was left next to the Aram. Maklo shel Aharon uprachav ushkedav. This is the staff that Aharon used when he stood up after the whole Korach story. And he had to bring the Ketoret, and then Aharon, basically he had this miracle happen that all sorts of flowers and shkedim were coming, almonds were coming out of growing from his staff. So that staff was saved. So if you look again in the Taklin Chadatin, it says Yalef Mishmeret, Dichtibe leMishmeret, V'chein Tzantzene Katuv leMishmeret, for saving. Okay, So it says it there, and it says it also by the man. So again, once the man is next to the Aram, then also this must have been left next to the Aram. The last one is the one that's a little bit different, because all those things were miracles directly from God. Okay, well, the truth is the Shemana Mishcha isn't exactly a miracle, but we're going to see in the Gemara that it was miraculous, and we're going to see why. So they're all somehow connected with miracles that God did. Argaz Yeshiva Plishtim Hasham L'Elohei Yisrael. This is when the Plishtim stole the Aram, and then they bring it back. When they send it back, remember there was a whole thing, because then people were, right, there were all these things that happened in the Plishtim camp as a result of the Aram, right? Again, all these crazy things that our Plishtim says, we got to get this out of here, right? Which now, those were miraculous. All the occurrences that happened as a result of the Aram being with them were miraculous. So one could connect it with that. But the fact that in the end, what is it? The Plishtim sent it back, and maybe that's a miracle. It's a miracle that they took it from us, and theoretically they could have taken it forever. But the miracle was that God made these things happen, which caused the Plishtim to return it. And not only did they returned it with gifts for us. So, which was gold jewelry. So the gold that they brought back with it, we kept as a reminder of the miracle that happened. So again, it's similar because it has to do with some miracle, but it's a little bit weird because it's something the Plishtim gave us, and we kept that. The Philistines gave us gifts, and we kept that. It's a little bit strange. And in fact, the Rambam doesn't mention this one. He mentions all the others, and he doesn't mention this one, which is very interesting because it really is different. So I was happy to see that he doesn't mention it, because I thought when I read it that this does seem different than all the others. So now all those things, according to our Gemara, were saved, right? They were hidden and buried so that nobody would take them. Mi gnazo. So now the big question: who's the one who decided and why? Yoshiao gnazo. Yoshiao was one of the later kings, right? Not the end, but close to the end. He was a good king who basically came back to God. He makes a big reformation, kind of does a whole turnaround, and he reforms the temple. And he finds what happened was, the whole thing was they were doing a reformation of the temple, and he finds a Sefer Torah. It's as if like he had never seen a Sefer Torah, it sounds like, from the Pshat there. And he opens the Sefer Torah and he starts to read. And what does he read inside? So we're going to see one of the verses he reads from the klalot, the curses in Sefer Dvarim of what's going to be in the future. And it says, Kevan shera'a shekatuv. Now we understand why Yoshiao, because he finds this Torah and starts reading it and says, oh my God, look what it says in here. Yolech Hashem otcha ve'em malkecha. God will send you and your king. Now you can imagine the king reading this and getting a little scared. Asher takum alecha, right? Who will be the king among you, upon you, or on you. El goya shelo yadata. You're going to be sent to a place where you don't know, right? You're going to be sent to some nation that's not yours. Shelo yadata tavaotecha. You've never lived there before. So what does he say? And maybe he saw the signs coming. He saw it coming that maybe the Churban, the destruction, was going to come soon, which was true. Amadu gnazel. So he said, listen, I'm going to take care of this right now. I don't want to have any issues in the future. What if it happens in my time? So he hid everything. Hadau dichtiv. And how do you know this? Because it says, Vayomer leleviim hamivinim u'lechol Yisrael hakdoshim laHashem tnu et aron hakodesh bebayit asher bana Shlomo ben David melech Yisrael en lachem masa b'katef. Okay, this is a verse from Divrei Hayamim. Okay, from Divrei Hayamim Bet pasuk Perek Lamed Hey. It's describing what Yoshiao did. Now, here's something strange. He says to the Leviim, who understand, and L'Kol Yisrael, who are Kedoshim to God, who are sanctified to God, put the Aron HaKodesh in the house that Shlomo built. Now, why is this strange? The Aron was already there. It wasn't missing. So why would you be putting it there? And then there's these words that also don't make sense. Ein lachem masa b'katef. You have nothing to carry on your shoulders. What does this mean? So, Amar lahem, im golehi imachem. Right. So the first point is that he says, put the Aron. It means put the Aron underground, not put it in there. Put it there so it will stay there forever. So even if this house gets destroyed, that will remain. So that's the first thing. Now we have also explained, what does it mean, ein lachem masa b'katef? You will not carry it on your shoulders, or you will not have a burden on your shoulders. Im golehi imachem lebavel, ein atem machzirim oto od limkomo. He says to them, listen, if this goes with you into exile, it will never come back. Ela ata. Okay, so therefore, what does it mean? Ein lachem masa b'katef. You remember they carried the Aron with them. If they would carry it, certainly in the desert, right? They always carried it from place to place. So he's basically telling them, if you go to Galut, you will never carry this back. You will lose it forever. That's what it means. Ein lachem masa b'katef. You'll have nothing to carry on your shoulders. It will not come with you. Then the verse says, and now go worship God. So the question is, why is he saying that? He's saying that because what he's telling them is, even though we don't have the Aron anymore, you can still worship God. You don't need the Aron to worship God. You can still worship God, right? Imagine they're living in the time of the temple. There's no destruction yet. They're wondering, what are you doing? And why did you take away our Aron, which was so important to us? And he's telling them, listen, you don't really need it. Okay. Which is fine. Funny because he's basically saying, I want it for future generations. I want to make sure we still have it. So I'm going to hide it, but we're not going to use it right now, right? Which they're wondering, why are we using it right now? And he's basically saying this isn't really necessary. Pitum Shemen HaMishcha. Now we're going to learn how they, since we mentioned the Shemen HaMishcha, how did they prepare it? What was in it? So some of the stuff is explicit in a verse. We're going to read the whole verse. It doesn't say the whole verse in the Psukim. It's hard to understand the Gemara if you don't read the whole verse. So we'll read the whole verse. It's a pasuk in Shmot Lamed, Psukim 23 to 24, Kaf Gimel to Kaf Dal. V'ata kach lecha besamim rosh. Okay, take besamim. Mar drol. Okay, that's the first one. Chamesh meot. Okay, 500 portions. We don't exactly know what a portion is, but we're going to see it's a lot of whatever it is. It's a lot. Take 500 portions. The kinamon bosem, cinnamon, right, or kinamon. Machatzito, half that amount. Chamishimu matayim, 250. Vikane bosem, another type of spice. Chamishimu matayim, 250. Vikida, a fourth spice. Chamesh meot b'shekel hakodesh v'shem zayitin. So take 500 with the shekel hakodesh. And it's 500 measurements of a shekel kodesh. I'm not exactly sure how to translate that. Shemen zayit hin. That means a hin of shemen zayit. This goes back to what we saw yesterday with all the nisachim. The nisachim are half a hin, or a third of a hin, or a quarter of a hin. A hin was 12 log. That's how we got to 6 log, or 4 log, or 3 log, whether it's a quarter, a third, or a half. So here we have a whole log of shemen. That's what it says in the Torah. So you're going to take whole log, okay, 12, a whole hin, which is 12 log. And then we're going to, okay, well, we're going to basically, I think, I'm trying to remember now my measurements. It's either 3.6 or 7.2 liters. I think that's in all of 12 log. I have to just double check that that's right. Where did I see that measurement? Here, right. 12 log is either 3.6 or 7.2 liters or somewhere in between. Okay, this is classic that there's a range of opinions. Right here, it's double the amount. So it's a big range. Either 3.6 to 7.2 liters of oil, okay, which is a lot, but not a ton. And now we're putting, okay, what they're now going to say in the Gemara is, Shehen 1,500 manim, simple math, okay, it's 1,500 portions of spices that we're putting into this 12 log of shemen, because we had 500 of 2 of them and 250 of 2 of them. So simple math. Wait till we get to the more complicated math today, although it's not really complicated. It's just more visually complicated, but I'll help you with that. We'll get to that later when we talk about the size of the Aron and what was in it. Anyway, he says, Shabo shokin et ha'ikarim. What would they do? They would take this oil and they would boil all the stems of the spices, right? The roots of the spices. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the way Rabbi Meir says it. So you take the oil, you boil up the oil, and you put in it the roots of the spices. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shokana yabimayim. You can't boil it up in the oil. What will happen? Think about that amount of oil with that amount of spices. It's a huge amount of spices. You're going to end up with all the oil is going to be absorbed into the roots of the spices, and you're going to end up with no oil, right? What happens when you try to fry things in oil? Often the oil gets absorbed into the item itself. So that's not going to work according to Rabbi Yehuda. So he says you would cook them first in water, boil them in water. What happens? The aromas rise to the top. Noten shemen al gabehem. You put the oil at the top. What else happens to oil when you put it on top of water? It also stays at the top. So now you have all the aromas at the top. You have the oil at the top. You would leave it there for a few minutes or I don't know how long, till it absorbs all the aromas. And then you basically take off the top layer, right? Then you would then remove the oil, which is very easy because it's at the top there. Just like the people who make perfumes, that's what they do. Shemen mishchat kodesh v'gomer. So now they say, that's why it says, now, again, they left out the important part of the verse, so you have to read the whole verse. It says, V'asita oto shemen mishchat kodesh, rokeach mirkachat maaseh rokeach. You make it like the rokhim do. The rokhim, now, in modern Hebrew, it's a pharmacist. But it's basically the people who make the perfumes, like they do that. That's how you should do it. This is how they do it. They didn't do it, but they just boiled it in the oil. That's not an effective method, certainly not with this amount of I see Gita wrote that it's 1,500 shekel is 13.5 kilo. So 13.5 kilo of spices inside, right? Spices are also not so heavy. I mean, it's not just the spices, it's the branches that go with it. But either way, it's a lot. And it's not going to fit in all that oil, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, this is how you do it. Tani Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Gilad. Shemen mishcha she'asa Moshe b'midbar ma'aseh nisim na'asa bo mitchila v'ad sof. It was all miraculous, this Shemen HaMishcha, from the beginning to the end. What are the miracles that happen with it? As I mentioned before, it doesn't sound miraculous, but it really was miraculous. Shemitchila lo haya bo ela 12 log, shene'emar shemen zayit hin. Im lasuch bo et ha'ikarim lo haya bo sefek, al acha kama v'kama sha'or bolea, v'yitzim bolim v'yorah bola'at. Okay, let's stop for a minute. We're in the middle of a sentence, but we'll stop. First of all, exactly what we just said. This oil, forget about cooking it and the oil being absorbed, but you can't even soak all of those spices in that amount of oil. And even if you could, forget about it all getting absorbed when you cook it up. So it doesn't make any sense. And therefore, it must have been miraculous what happened. Next, by the way, there's a problem with the nusach. This is Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda was before with Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that it wasn't that they didn't boil it in there. So there's a bit of a nusach. Some people have the opposite nusach, actually, in Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda previously. The Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that. There's a bit of a nusach issue. I'll just put that aside. So that's the first miracle. Then he says, and with this amount of oil, which is not a ton of oil, so they use this to anoint all the utensils in the Mishkan. Okay, so the Mishkan and all its utensils, the Shulchan and all the utensils that went with the table, the menorah and all the utensils that went with that. Every day of the Yimei Miluim, they did a Mishcha of Aaron and his sons. And every high priest and the kings, although we'll see not all the kings, with this same oil that Moshe prepared. And that oil was left, lidorotechem, it said. So this oil remained from the time of Moshe, even though it was used for all these things. That's clearly a miracle. Okay. Now we're going to learn which kings do we anoint. So now they say, Melech b'tchilata u'mashicha. So what kind of king? The first one of a dynasty. Okay, he's the one who needs to be anointed. Melech ben melech, but if you're the son of a king, ain't you don't need to be anointed. We're going to have to see a whole bunch of exceptions to this rule. My time, or where do we get this from? It says by David HaMelech, go anoint him because zehu. Zeh, we always darshan for something. This is the one. This meaning he's going to be anointed. No one else is going to need to be anointed after him. Right? His son's not going to need to be anointed, which is actually kind of ironic because we're going to see that his son does need to be anointed for some other reason. But theoretically, his son wouldn't need to be anointed. But the Kohen Gadol does need to be anointed. Okay? And some people say it's because the Kohen Gadol has to be worthy, whereas the son of a king doesn't need to be worthy. Usually it goes to the oldest son, where Kohen Gadol doesn't necessarily. Anyway, there's a question why. They're going to prove it from a verse. V'kulo kayam la'atid lavo. And this, one second. Right. They proved it from a verse because only by the king did it say zeh and not by the Kohen Gadol. V'kulo kayam la'atid lavo. And all this will still be in the future. It's forever. Hadau dichtiv. And this is the verse that we've mentioned before. Shemen mishcha kodesh yezeli lidorotechem. This Shemen Mishcha Kodesh that you're making, Moshe, will be for me for all the future generations. Another thing about anointed kings, you should always do it by a stream. Why? Because a stream continues, and it's representative of the fact that you want the kingdom to continue. Shne'emal, I'm going to see it by Shlomo. Now we see that they did anoint Shlomo. V'yirkavtem et Shlomo b'ni al hapirda shirli. David tells them, this is David's at the end of his life, right? When there's a whole battle over who's going to take over. So David says, that's when they come to him, right? And Batsheva and Natan Navi, and they say, make sure that Shlomo's the one. He's right. David is sick in bed. Anyway, he says, you should ride Shlomo b'ni ala pirda asher li v'horadetem oto el Gichon. Right, take him to the Gichon. It's a stream. Umashach oto sham tzadok hakohen v'natan hanavi lemelech al Yisrael. They should anoint him there. So David gives orders where he should be anointed, and from here we learn that's where kings should be anointed. Ein moshchim melech bemelech ela mipnei hamachloket. So now we're going to learn, well, sometimes you have to do it when there's a debate about who's going to take over, which is exactly what happened with Shlomo. And so now we're going to see. So now we're going to see all these times where kings whose fathers were kings also got anointed. Adoniyahu was trying to be king, and therefore they had to anoint him so that it was clear who was the true king. Yoash mipnei Atalyahu. Another king was Yoash. He was the one where Atalyah, she was the Malka, she was the grandmother of Yoash, and she basically, right, she was the mother of the king at the time, and she wipes out almost the whole family, and he gets hidden, and he's the one left from the family, and he ends up taking over, and she is kind of fighting for her, she wants to be it, so therefore they anointed him. Yoachaz mipnei Yoyakim achiv, shaya gadol mimenu shtei shanim. In this case, Yoyakim also became king, but first Yehoachaz became king. He was the younger brother. So if he's the younger brother, right, he needs to be anointed, so it's clear he's the one who's supposed to be king. Yehu mipnei Yoram. Yehu was another king, but he's a king in the Israelite kingdom, and he was a battle with him and Yoram, and he takes over, he does a coup, and he wasn't from the family of the kings, and therefore he gets anointed. To which the Gemara says, wait, stop for a minute. This doesn't make any sense. Lo kenktiv kumishacheu kizehu, zeta umishicha, another drasha on that pasuk, go anoint David because he's the one. Not only he, and there, since he's the first, and that's why, but not of his son. But also, they're going to learn from this. This is only those from the Judean kingdom, not from the Israelite kingdom. So why is Yehu, who was a king of Israel and not a king of the Judean kingdom, why is he, remember, there was a whole split. There was Malchut Yehuda, Malchut Israel, the Judean and Israelite. So why is he getting anointed? So they answer with a question. They say, wait a minute, let's forget about him. We have a question with someone else. And you should have caught this if you were paying attention and you know your history. Yehoachaz was the son of Yoshiyahu. Now, there's a bit of a problem with anointing Yehoachaz if he's the son of Yoshiyahu. So they say, Eli Yehoachaz mipnei Yoyakim achiv, shaya gadol mimenu shtei shanim, v'lo Yoshiyahu gnazeo. Didn't we just say that Yoshiyahu hid the Shemen HaMishcha? Which means that when he became king, when Yoshiyahu died, there should be no Shemen HaMishcha. So besides that, Yehu shouldn't have been anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. Also, Yehoachaz shouldn't have been anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. So, and by the way, I didn't point this out, but you can look at the Pesukim inside. All of these, there's verses that say they were anointed. That's where we got to all these people. So, Hada Amara ba'afar Simon nimshach. So basically, the answer is Yehoachaz must have been anointed not with the Shemen HaMishcha, but with something else. What else would you anoint a king with? Well, the balsam oil is always known to be the highest oil. So it must have been, it was balsam oil from the Afar Simon. And right, that's balsam. So now they say it must be therefore that Yehu was also, and that's why it's not a problem. It's only the Shemen HaMishcha, the special Shemen HaMishcha that was used for David and the other kings, but that wasn't what was used, not for Yehoachaz and not for Yehu. And that answers our question about Malchut Yisrael. Okay, you use something that's like a horn shape. And I tell Malchut overet. Karen is always used by Aram, Karen, Karnenu, by Yaron Karnenu. It's always used as a term of glory. So therefore, Karen is right. Matzmiach Karen LeDavid. It's always used in future about greatness. So therefore, Karen is used not a pach. Okay, first of all, the word pach is a jug. A jug is usually made of earthenware, and that is something that breaks easily. So again, you want to use something, a keren is long lasting, doesn't break. So therefore, we're going to say, thank you, Vayaron Keren Mishichov. Thank you for correctly getting the right pasuk there. So now he says, that's from Tfilah Chana. So now they say, so David there's the Lachuto Averet, because a pach is a jug which breaks. So their kingdom is taken away from them. But the ones who did it with a keren, the horn, theirs lasted forever. Amar Rabbi Yudin an Vatandaria. Hashem lo yasur shevet mi Yehuda. Did I skip? No. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. Oh, a few words. Ein moshchim kohanim melachim. You can't make a kohen a king. Okay, this is again about authority, right? There's division of labor here. You can't have someone who's also a kohen and also a king. These are different types of leaders, and you don't mix those. Okay, kohen can't be a king. Yudan Anvatandaria says Al Shem lo yasur shevet mi Yehuda, because the kingdom always is with Yehuda. Now this is a strange pasuk to prove it, because if that's the case, it can't just be kohanim. It could be nobody except for someone from that's what the words weren't coming to my head. All right, thank you for telling me. The separation of church and state, right? That's right. That I was actually thinking of more like the separation of three branches of government, and how each one, there's legislature, judicial, right? There's each of these, the presidency, they're all different. There's separation of not just church and state, but I was thinking more of, that's it, checks and balances. Words don't always come to me when I'm in the middle of teaching this. So checks and balances, or balances of power. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, now we get to, so according to this, it's really no one can be king, not just Kohanim, anyone who's not in Shevet Yehuda, but some people say, really, this means no one can be. However, if you have no choice and there's no one from the house of Yehuda, then you can give it for the Shevet of Yehuda, the tribe of Judah. You can give it to someone else, but never to Kohanim. And the second pasuk is a better proof. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abi gives a different pasuk. L'man yarich yamim mamlachto hu banav b'kerev Yisrael makti batrei lo yu lakohanim alevim. Okay, this is in Parshat Shoftim. It says about the king, right? So he will be long in his mom, like the dynasty will stay in his family. And then it says, Lo yula kohanim alevim. So they darshan, it's obviously talking about something else, but they're saying, oh, this means the kohanim can't be kings. And then it's more clear that it's kohanim and levim. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to have a little bit of an issue about who Yehoachaz was, and the verses don't really match up. There's a verse in Divrei Hayamim that says, Ubnei Yoshiao, the sons of Yoshiao, Habechor Yoshiao. Now this is strange. Didn't we just say he was younger by 2 years than Yehoyakim? So it says the Bechor is Yoshiao, Yochanan Hasheni, he's the second, Yehoyakim Hashlishi, and Sikiyahu Revi'i. Sorry, I said that wrong. Sorry, let me read that again. Ubnei Yoshiao, Habechor Yochanan, Hasheni Yehoyakim, the second is Yehoyakim. I put the commas in the wrong place. Hashlishit Sikiyahu, the third is Sikiyahu, Shalom Revi'i Shalom. The fourth is Shalom. So now we're going to talk about these four and who they were, and there's a little bit of lack of clarity here. So interestingly, Rabbi Yochanan is darshaning this word Yochanan. Hu Yochanan, hu Yehoachaz. Okay, so first of all, Yehoachaz doesn't appear in the verse at all. So number one, Yehoachaz is Yochanan. But then it doesn't make sense because Haktiv HaBechor Yochanan, and didn't we say Yoshiyahu was younger? So they say Bechor L'Malchut. Bechor means he was the oldest, meaning he got the Malchut, not that he was really the oldest by birth. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, hu Shalom hu Tzikiyahu, they're really the same person. Vaktiv Hashlishit Tzikiyahu v'Revi Shalom. How could you say they're the same person when it says he was the third and he was the fourth? They can't possibly be the same child. Shlishi l'toladot Revi'i l'malchut. He was the third born, but he was the fourth one who became king, because there was Yochaz, then Yehoyakim, Yehoyachin, and then Tzikiyahu. So he was the fourth king. Tzikiyahu shetzidek alav midat hadin. Right, he was the one that the Churban, the destruction, happened in his time. So that's when God, the midah of justice, came and did justice. Shalom shebiyamav shalma malchut Beit David. It was the end, the closure of the malchut Beit David. Lo shalom hayashmei v'lo Tzikiyahu hayashmei ela Metanya. But his real name was not this or that. His real name was Metanya. Hadahu d'chtiv vayamlech melech Bavel et Metanya dodo tachtav vayasev et shmo Tzikiyahu. The king of Bavel made Metanya. He was a puppet king, right? He was made a king by the Bavliim, and his name was Metanya there. It says that he got the name Tzikiyahu from Nebuchadnezzar. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, now we're going to get to the measurements of the Aram. And for this, I did some show and tell. Okay, we have a box here. This is our Aram. Okay, this is about this kind of size and shape it was anyway. Okay, we're now going to see that the Aram, according to the Torah, it was 2.5 amot by 2.5 amot length, 1.5 amot width, and 1.5 amot height. Okay, so this isn't exactly the size because this isn't the same as the height, but just imagine. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the question is, we have the measurements of amot, but what we don't have is how many, remember this from Eruvin, how many tvachim, handbreadths, we also learned it in Shabbat, are in an amah, okay? Because an amah is made up of either 5 or 6. So that's going to affect our measurements. You see here, we have 15, and on the other side, we're going to have 12 and a half. We're going to see different measurements, okay? So we're going to first start with the 15 measurement we'll see in a minute. It's going to be 15 by 9. So now so we're going to start here with Amar Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to have Rabbi Yochanan's approach and Rish Lakish's approach. The Amah shel shisha tvachim haya ha'aron asur. All the amot are 6 tvachim amot. Mantana, who's the one who says the Amah shel shisha tvachim? Rabbi Meir. This is Rabbi Meir's opinion. Ditnan, as it says in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir Amar, Kol amot hayu bebenoniyot. You might remember this. He says all amot are regular ones. That means 6. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, amot habinyan shisha. When you're talking about building things, like not utensils, but the krashim, the beams, and things that are building items, they're 6 tvachim, 6 handbreadths in the amah, in the cubit. Shel kelim, but when it comes to utensils, which the Aron was a kli because it was portable, chamisha. Okay, binyan are things that are in the ground. Kelim are something that you carry. So now we're going to focus on Rabbi Yehuda. On Rabbi, my mistake, on Rabbi Meir, who said shisha. Okay, 6. Al da'atei de Rabbi Meir. We're going to keep seeing this du amal. Du amar means de amal. That he said. Okay, according to Rabbi Meir, de amal, b'shamal shel shisha tvachim haya aron asuri, or kol shel aron 15 tvachim. We're going to get to 15 and a half. This is very simple math. Dichtiv. Amatayim, this is very easy math today. It's just more visually how to see it, which is why I created this box so you can see. Amatayim v'chetzi orko, amta ashta, v'amta ashita, or ashita. So each amah is 6. So we have one amah 6. It says amatayim v'chetzi. So 2.5. Each amah is 6. 6 plus 6 is 12. V'chetzi, palgut amah, amata, tlata. Half an amah is 3. So 6 plus 6 plus 3, 15. Very easy. Va'arba'a luchot hayubo. Okay, now we're going to get to our luchot. So I couldn't find good glue stick this morning, so it's not working so great. But we're now going to get to our 4 luchot that were inside. Okay, so here we go. Shnayim shlemim u'shnayim shvurim. 2 are whole and 2 are broken. There's a bit of a nusach issue here. I'm going to read it according to one nusach, even though you might see the text might say something a little different by you. Okay, or something pretty different, but this seems to be the only way this could be read. Dichtiv, asher shibarta v'samtem ba'aron. It says, right, the luchot that you broke and they get put in the Aram. So it's clear that the broken ones and the whole ones were in the Aram. They don't really relate to the fact that the broken ones were in pieces. We're assuming they still have to fit in a whole way. So now they say, haluchot hayu kol echad ve'echad. How big were the luchot? So you can see here by the picture. Kol echad ve'echad or koshisha. The length of them was 6. And ruchbo shlosha. And here's the problem with the girsa. The Bavli says it was shisha, but this one, it has to be read as 3, otherwise it makes no sense. 6 by 3. Now, remember, this is the length of the length is 15, but here we're going to do the length of the luchot the other way. That's what the Gemara is going to say. Again, not according to this nusach, but we'll read it that way. V'tein orkan rochban shaluchot laorko shalaron. The width of the luchot should go based on the length of the Aron. That basically means, right, it should be perpendicular, right? So the Aron, the length is this way, and the length of the luchot, the long side, is going to go according to the other way. Okay, it's going to be, that's why I did it here. They're going to be standing up inside. So now, so now if you do 3 times 4, you're going to get to 12. So 12 across a space of 15. That's how they're going to fit inside. So now you're left with 3 tvachim. What happened with those 3 tvachim? Okay, each wall, the thickness of the wall itself of the Aron was half a tefach. So now you get to, each one was half a tefach. So you're left with, that equals a tefach. You're left with 2 tvachim. What was used in this 2 tvachim space? Okay, for that we have, here we go. Here we go. Here's our Torah. Okay, we're going to read that inside now. This Sefer Torah, there was a Sefer Torah in the Aron together with it. Okay, so now, Rochbo shel Aron. So I see, Shoshana, you're asking about the 2 arcs with different luchot. This is obviously according to the one opinion that there was one Aron. Okay, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. You're right. Good point. Okay, dichtiv. So now we have to figure out what about the width. How much space did this take up across the width of the Aram. So the width was 9, we're going to see, okay? Because ama v'chetzi rochbo, the width was 1.5. So again, amta ashita. Each ama is 6, so that's 6. Upalgut amta tzlata, 6 plus 3 is 9. V'arba'a luchot hayubo, shnayim shlemim u'shnayim shvuim. Now we're just repeating. This second part of the daf is going to be easy because a lot is repetition. There were 4 luchot in there, 2 whole, 2 broken. Dichtiv asher shibarta v'samta ba'aron, the same pasuk they're going to quote each time. They were broken and put in the aron. Haluchot hayu kol echad ve'echad orkan shisha tvachim ve'ruchban shlosha tvachim. So again, you have to change the nusach. Each one was a length of 6 and a width of 3. Now again, you have to fix this. Again, it has to be going in the opposite direction as the Aram, remember? So the length of the luchot, which is 6, is going to go across that space of 9. So now you're going to be left with simple math. 9 minus 6 is 3. So you're left with 3. So now the first tefach is easy. Chatzi tefach mikan lekotel zeh. V'chatzi tefach mikan lekotel zeh, right? You're going to have half a tefach on either side for the wall. Utfachim. Now you're left with 2 tefachim. What do you do with that? L'shilut makom shesefer Torah munach. Well, how are you going to get the Torah out if you don't have space to pull it on either side? So the sides, we have a tefach of space to basically be able to control. That's what shilut is, to control, like a shalat is a remote control, right? So to control the Sefer Torah. There's a bit of a debate about what exactly it means, shilut Sefer Torah. Some people say they never took the Torah out. Some people say they did. Anyway, it's a debate exactly what it is, but somehow it's to serve the use of the Sefer Torah. Okay, that's our first opinion. Okay, that's Rabbi Yochanan. According to Rabbi Yochanan, there's 4 luchot, Sefer Torah, and that's how we get the space. There's a little space above, a little space below to move. And on the sides, there's no space at all because it's the walls on the other side of the thickness of them, and that's it. Okay, that's our first interpretation. Now we get to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, ba'ama bat chamisha tvachim haya ha'aron asur. He holds like the other opinion, that it was actually ama bat chamisha tvachim and not shisha. So now everything's going to be smaller. Now, mantana ba'ama bat chamisha tvachim. Who is this? This is Rabbi Yehuda. Taninan, as we see in the Mishnah, Taman, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ama b'yan shisha, kol ha'kelim chamisha, but the utensils were 5. V'ahen aron klihu. The aron was a kli. So al da'atei de Rabbi Yehuda, do'amar, ba'ama shel chamisha tvachim haya orko asui, 12 tefach b'mechze. It was 12.5. Why is it 12.5? Again, simple math. Dichtiv, 2.5 orko, amta chamsha ba'amta chamsha, 2 of 5. Upalgut amta, tre uplig, right? And the half an amma was 2.5. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second to answer a question. What was the Sefer Torah for? This we actually saw a few days ago. They had a Sefer Torah there to use for hakel and to use for certain things. There was a Sefer Torah always in the Mikdash. Okay, we talked about the people who were the Megihei Sefer Torah, that they edited the Torah, the Sefer Torah that was there. So that's obviously the one that some people claim was in the Aram. Okay, not everyone thinks it was in the Aram, but we're going to see now. According to this interpretation, you can already do the simple math and realize, assuming you think the luchot are the same size, which they are, there's no room for the Sefer Torah. And according to Rish Lakish, the Sefer Torah didn't sit in the Aram. But it's the same Sefer Torah that they had in the Beit HaMikdash. It's just a matter, did it sit in the Aram or did it not? So now they say, so al da'atei de Rabbi Yehuda, so we got to 12.5. Arba'a luchot hayubo, again, this is a repeat, shnei shlemim u'shnayim shvulim, right? 2 broken, 2 whole. Dichtiv asher shibarta v'samtem ba'aron. So clearly the broken ones were also in the Aron. V'aluchot haya kol echad orkan shisha tvachim v'ruchban shlosha tvachim. Again, you have to change the nusach, but 6 by 3. 10 orkan shaluchot le'orko shel aron. So now here's our picture with the 12.5. So now you have 4 luchot going across. You have 12.5 space, and these cover a space of 12. So now you're left with half a tefach. So what do we do with that half a tefach? Now there's 4 etzbaot, 4 fingers in a tefach. So 2 fingers is going to be half a tefach. So if we're left with, right, so it's 2 fingers. So now we're going to basically say, what do we do with those 2 fingers of width that are left? Nishtayar sham chatzi tefach, there's a chatzi tefach left. Etzba l'kotel mikan, etzba l'kotel mikan. According to him, the walls of the Aram were thinner. They were only an etzba, not half a tefach. They were a quarter of a tefach. Rochbo shel aron shib'a v'tfachim b'mechze. Okay, so now the rochav, the width is 7.5. We're going to do the exact same thing. Again, we're going to say, I lost my place. רוחבו של ארון 7 טפחים ומחצה, דכתיב, 1.5 רוחבו, אמתא 5 ופלגות אמתא תרי ופלג, 5 plus 2.5, 7.5, וארבעה לוחות היו בו, 2 שלמים ו2 שבורים, דכתיב אשר שיברת ושמת בארון, 4 לוחות, הלוחות היה כל אחד ואחד אורכן 6 ורוחבן 3 טפחים, 10 אורכן לרוחבה של ארון, right? The rochav, the width goes based on the length, okay? So, or the length goes based on the width, right? We're basically going to say the length of it covers the width of the aron, the length of the luchot. And then we're going to say, sorry, I skipped a word. Right? According to that, we're going to have 1.5. 6. We're left with 1.5. What do we do with the 1.5? So again, we already said the thickness of the walls was an etzba. So etzba mikan, etzba mikan, etzba mikan, etzba mikan. So in terms of the 7.5, you're going to take away 2 etzbaot, which is half a tefach. So we're left with a tefach. What do you do with the tefach? We're going to say, chatzi tefach mikan, v'chatzi tefach mikan l'shilut. Then you're going to leave a tefach here, a tefach there for movement, if you ever have to move the luchot. Now, why you'd have to move the luchot, I can't explain, but that's what they say. There's just a little extra space there. Okay, now we got the aron down pat. I hope that was helpful. Another question about the aron. It says about the aron, it was covered with gold on the inside and on the outside. So now they're going to say, how was it covered with gold? How did he build it? Rabbi Chanina Amar shalosh tevot asel. There were actually 3 boxes, one inside the other, like those nesting boxes, that one fits inside the other. So 2 were gold, 1 was wood. Natan shel zahav, b'shel etz, b'shel etz, b'shel zahav, right? The outer one was gold. Then the inner one was wood. And then the outer one was gold. And in that way, tzipau, right? It was covered then. Dichtiv, tzipita, oto, zahav, tahor, mi bayit, mi bachutz. It should be covered on the inside and on the outside. So here you have it, a box of gold and a box of gold on the outside. And that's the way it was covered. Then they say, but wait, there's another pasuk where it says there in the verse, titzapenu, which is an extra covering. So what's the extra covering? Lavis fatoa el yonah, right? If you imagine those nesting things, the top of the wood one is going to jut out and be wood. You're going to see the top of it, the rim. So you had to also cover that with gold in addition. It was 1 box and they just covered it with gold. Then you have to say, between each board that they built it with, you had to put gold in between each one. Now we're going to see something also that you might have never heard before. How we always imagine all the pictures of the luchot show 5 on one side, 5 on the other luach, right? There's 2 luchot, 5 on one, 5 on the other. That's only going to be the first opinion. We're going to see 4 opinions here. Rabbi Chanani ben Gamliel Omer, 5 luach zeh v'chamisha luach zeh, 5 on each. Hadau dichtiv v'yichtevem al shtei luchot avanim. It's written on 2 luchot and 5 luach zeh v'chamisha luach zeh. That's the simple reading. Rabbanan amrei 10 luach zeh v'asara luach zeh, 10 on each. All 10 were on each one. Okay, and they learn from there that all 10 were on the same, and then it says Vayichtevem al shnei luchot avanim. The Vayichtevem is referring to 10, the 10 luchot. So therefore, it must be all 10 on each one. Asara luach zeh, asara luach zeh. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai omer 20 al luach zeh ve20 al luach zeh. How do you get 20 on each? Tichtiv Vayichtevem al shnei luchot avanim. You write them in plural. So now we're going to say it refers to, you write on each one, 10 on one side and 10 on the back side. They were written on the front and on the back. Now you're going to wonder, where can you go from here? Where's the 4th opinion? Rabbi Simai amar 40 luach zeh v'arba'im luach zeh. Dichtiv mizeh u'mizeh ktuvim. They were written on all sides. He understands it, tetragona. It's like a cube. And each one was a cube, again, not the way we visualize it in all the pictures that we see. And on each of the 4 sides, it had all 10 commandments. So interesting opinions here. Hananya ben Achi Rabbi Yoshua Amayel ben kol dibor v'dibor dikdukev otiotea shel Torah. In between each one are all these nuances of the Torah. Tichtiv memulaim b'tarshish. Says they're filled with tarshish. What is tarshish? It reminds us of the Yama Tarshish. Yama Rabba, like a big sea. So what does that mean? Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Karavamate Hadin Kraya Hava Oma. When he got to that pasuk, he would explain, Yafelim Deni Hananya ben Achi Rabbi Yoshua. It's good what he said, because Mahayam ben Gal Gadol legal Gadol Galim Ktanim. In between the big waves are small waves. Kach ben Kol Dibor v'Dibor Tiktukev Otiotea Shel Torah. So in between each one, each Dibor, which is like a big wave, are all the details of everything in the Torah. Basically a way of saying everything is included in the Luchot. You probably heard this idea, right? That somehow you can get to all the mitzvot through the 10 commandments. Amar Rabbi Tanchuma, Itkashet Komi Rabbi Pinchas. We're now going back to the size of the Aram and whether the Sefer Torah was inside or outside. Atik Rabbi Yehuda, velo Atik Rabbi Meir. It makes a lot more sense according to Rabbi Yehuda. My time at Rabbi Yehuda, Dichtiv Lakoch et Sefer Torah Zev Samtem Oto Mitzad Aron Brit Hashem. It says you took the Torah and they put it next to Aron Brit Hashem. And then, so it's, okay, so now it says, right, they put it next to the Aron. Just one second. I just want to check one thing. Rabbi Shimon. Right. So Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that the Sefer Torah wasn't inside because it was on the side because there wasn't room for the Sefer Torah. So that makes sense. Al da'ate de Rabbi Yehuda da'amar hechan Sefer Torah natun kemin gluskos asur lo mibachutz v'ya Sefer Torah natun b'tocho. It had its own box and it sat in that box. My time de Rabbi Meir tichtiv v'natat et hakaporet al Aron milamala v'et Aron el Aron titen et ha'idut asher eten alecha. So now they say, wait, there's this pasuk that says you should put the Aron, put the kaporet, the covering on the Aron, and then in the Aron put the edut. The problem is a few pasukim before it says you should put the edut in the Aron. So now they're going to say, according to Rabbi Meir, this makes perfect sense. The edut in the first pasuk are the luchot, and the edut in the second pasuk is the Torah, and that makes a lot of sense. Now this should be to Rabbi Yehuda, not to Rabbi Meir. It's a mistake. Al da'ate de Rabbi Yehuda da'amar. So how do you explain according to Rabbi Yehuda? Because there weren't two different things in the Aram. He says, "Ein mukdam u'muchar b'Torah, ela ve'ela Aron titen et ha'idut asher eten alecha ve'achar kach v'natat et hakaporet al Aron milamala." That pasuk is describing what happened in the previous pasuk. There's no order in the Torah, and that order where it says they put the kaporet and then they put the Aron is really the reverse. What it means is first they put the edut in the Aron and then they covered it with the kaporet. And it's really describing what happened in the previous pasuk about the luchot, and that's how he would explain that pasuk. Rabbi Pinchas b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, HaTorah shenatan lo Kadosh Baruch Hu l'Moshe, last line about for today, nitana lo esh levana charuta be'esh chora. It was given with a white fire engraved on a black, it was on a white fire, which was engraved with black fire. That's supposed to be an image of a cloth, black on white. Hi esh, muvulela be'esh, chatzuva be'esh, u'nituna be'esh. It is esh, it was mixed with fire, it was engraved in fire, and it was given in fire. Tichtiv mimino esh dat lamo. Okay, there's a pasuk which refers to the Torah as esh, and therefore we learn that the luchot were given with fire. It's like an image of the power and of the luchot. Okay, we'll end here for today. We'll start with the next Mishnah in tomorrow's daf about all the bowings. Have a good day, everyone.